"Please don't." She cried in fear. The rancher looked and froze in horror. Wild West stories. Samuel Harper wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned on the wooden fence post, staring at the grazing cattle. The herd moved lazily, chewing on the dry grass that still clung stubbornly to the earth despite the late summer heat. Samuel had lived on this land for over 20 years, and he knew every hill, every creek, and every tree. Life on the frontier was hard, but it had its quiet moments, moments when a man could almost believe the world was calm and safe. He adjusted his hat against the glare of the setting sun and started walking back toward the small cabin that had been his home for most of his life. It was a modest place, built with rough-cut timber and a stone chimney that puffed out gentle smoke whenever he had a fire going. Inside, the furniture was simple: a wooden table, a few chairs, and a bed with a patched quilt that his mother had once made. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and the faint scent of the herbs he kept for medicine. Life here was simple, predictable, and sometimes lonely. But Samuel liked it that way. He liked the quiet. He liked the rhythm of the land and the steady work that came with raising cattle. As he walked, he heard the soft crunch of his boots on the dry grass and the occasional distant call of a bird heading to its nest. The wind rustled through the trees along the creek, carrying with it the familiar smell of wet earth and wildflowers. Samuel paused for a moment, letting the peaceful sounds fill the space around him. But then, something different reached his ears. A faint, trembling sound carried across the field, almost drowned by the whispering wind. At first, he thought it was the wind itself or perhaps a coyote in the distance, but then he heard it again. "Please do." The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried the unmistakable sound of fear. Samuel froze. His hand instinctively went to the holster at his hip, resting on the grip of his revolver. The call was coming from the edge of the woods that bordered his property, where the trees grew thick and shadows stretched long. Samuel's heart began to beat faster, not out of panic, but out of a sense of responsibility. The frontier was full of danger, and strangers rarely came this far without reason. Still, a plea like that, it demanded attention. He took a careful step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the soft dirt. The light from the setting sun made the trees look even darker, their long branches swaying as though they were trying to reach out and touch the sky. Samuel adjusted his hat, squinting through the dim light. He could see a few broken branches near the forest floor, as if someone had pushed their way through in a hurry. The voice came again, shakier this time, almost desperate. "Please do." Samuel's hand tightened on his revolver, though he had no intention of shooting unless it became necessary. He moved cautiously, stepping over fallen logs and keeping his eyes on the thick underbrush. Every step made a small creak in the dry leaves beneath his feet. The voice sounded closer now, and he could make out the trembling figure of a young woman struggling to stand just inside the line of trees. Her clothes were torn, her hair in disarray, and her face streaked with dirt. Samuel stopped for a moment, studying her carefully. She looked exhausted, scared, and in need of help. "Hey there," he called gently, trying not to startle her. "Are you all right? What happened?" The woman flinched at his voice, her eyes wide and glistening with tears. She took a hesitant step back, clutching something close to her chest. "Please don't, they'll..." Her words trailed off as she shook her head violently, fear making her voice break. Samuel could see that she was terrified, and it was clear that whatever danger she had faced was not imaginary. He took another step forward, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said in a calm, steady voice. "You're safe here. My name is Samuel Harper. Come on, you can trust me. Let me help you." For a long moment she just stared at him, trembling, her eyes darting to the shadows behind her as if expecting someone or something to leap out. Then finally she nodded slightly, too weak to speak. Samuel approached slowly and held out his hand. The woman hesitated but took it, allowing him to help guide her out of the woods and toward the small clearing near his cabin. The sun had nearly disappeared, leaving the land bathed in twilight. The forest behind them seemed darker, more foreboding, as if it were watching silently. Once in the clearing, Samuel noticed the small bundle she had been clutching. It was wrapped in a faded cloth, and she held it protectively against her chest. "What's in there?" he asked gently. She shook her head. It's nothing. Please just help me," she whispered. Samuel nodded, understanding that whatever she had experienced had shaken her deeply. He led her toward the cabin, keeping his revolver close, ready for anything. Inside, he set the lantern on the table, its warm glow pushing back the shadows. He offered her a chair and some water from the jug he kept on the counter. She drank slowly, her hands trembling, as if she were still holding onto the fear from the woods. Samuel watched her carefully, noting the dirt and scratches on her arms and face. "You've had a rough time," he said softly. She nodded, unable to speak. As she rested, Samuel tried to piece together what had happened. The frontier was dangerous, yes, but it was unusual to find someone in such distress so far from town. He asked gentle questions, careful not to push her too hard. Gradually, she began to speak, her voice quiet but gaining strength. She told him about bandits who had attacked her family's homestead miles away. They had stolen livestock, burned buildings, and forced her to run for her life. Her parents and younger siblings had been scattered, and she had barely escaped. Samuel listened intently, the worry growing in his chest. He could see the fear in her eyes, and he felt a responsibility he had not anticipated. The frontier was not just about tending cattle and surviving the harsh weather. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. He looked around the cabin, thinking quickly. There were a few supplies, enough food to last a week, and he had several weapons. He could provide temporary safety, at least until the danger passed. Outside, the night deepened, and the wind carried sounds that made Samuel uneasy. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. The woman jumped, pressing closer to him, and he reassured her. "It's all right. You're safe here. Nobody's coming for you tonight." But even as he said it, he knew that the frontier was rarely forgiving. Danger could strike suddenly, and trust was something rare. He checked the locks on the cabin door, secured the windows, and ensured that the horses in the small barn were ready in case a quick escape became necessary. By the time they settled for the night, the woman was asleep on the bed with the bundle still clutched to her chest. Samuel sat in a chair by the fire, thinking about the events of the evening. He had lived a long time on this land, faced droughts, storms, and wild animals, but this human danger was something different. The fear in her voice, the terror she carried from a place far away, had left a mark on him. He realized that the quiet life he cherished could be disrupted at any moment, and that courage was not just about facing nature, but about standing against the cruelty of men. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying a haunting reminder of the world beyond the safety of the cabin. Samuel Harper, the solitary rancher, had never expected that a simple evening walk back from tending cattle would end with him protecting a stranger from the horrors of the frontier. But as he watched the fire crackle and the shadows dance on the walls, he understood one truth. In the Wild West, survival was not just about strength, skill, or courage. It was about compassion, quick thinking, and the willingness to face fear when it came calling. And somewhere deep in the night, the echoes of her words lingered in his mind. "Please." The first light of dawn crept over the hills, painting the ranch in soft hues of gold and pink. Samuel Harper stirred from his chair beside the fire, the memory of the young woman's terrified voice still echoing in his mind. He glanced at the bed where she slept, the bundle still clutched tightly against her chest. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths, evidence of the exhaustion and fear that had gripped her the night before. Samuel shook his head slowly, letting out a quiet sigh. He had lived alone for many years, and while he was used to quiet mornings, this was different. He could no longer pretend the world was safe or simple. He moved quietly to the small wooden table and poured himself a cup of strong coffee. The aroma filled the cabin, mingling with the scent of burning wood and the faint traces of dirt that clung to the walls. As he sipped, he thought about the woman and her story. Bandits, the word brought a chill to his spine. Out here in the middle of nowhere, law and order were scarce. A few men with bad intentions could ruin lives in minutes. He knew from experience that survival often depended on quick thinking, courage, and sometimes a bit of luck. The woman stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. Samuel watched her for a moment, noticing the dirt on her hands and the small scratches on her arms. Her clothes, torn and worn, told the story of a long and difficult journey. It was clear she had run through the woods, fought to stay ahead of those chasing her, and now she was safe, at least for the moment. Samuel felt a protective instinct rising within him, stronger than anything he had felt in years. He had tended cattle, fixed fences, and fought off wolves and wild animals, but protecting a person, a life, not just a herd, this was something entirely different. "Wake up, miss," he said softly, careful not to startle her. "It's morning, you're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open and she looked around the cabin, confusion and fear still lingering in her gaze. When she recognized Samuel, relief flooded her face, though it was mixed with lingering terror. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." Her voice broke and she looked down at the bundle in her arms. Samuel shook his head gently. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You ran from danger, you survived, that's what matters." She nodded slowly, still trembling. Her name, she finally told him, was Emily. She was barely 18, with a quiet strength that seemed hidden beneath the fear. As she recounted her journey, Samuel listened carefully, his mind piecing together the fragments of her story. Her family had lived on a small homestead several miles away, tending to their own cattle and crops. Bandits had attacked during the night, taking everything of value, threatening lives, and burning what remained. Emily had fled, trying to stay ahead of them. She had run through forests, across streams, and over hills, hiding wherever she could until finally she had reached Samuel's ranch. Samuel offered her a simple breakfast, some bread, cheese, and fresh water from the jug. She ate slowly, her hands still shaking, but the warmth and comfort of food seemed to ease her tension slightly. The cabin was small, but it provided shelter from the wind and the prying eyes of the world outside. Samuel had spent years building a place that was safe, a refuge in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, and now he realized it was serving its purpose in a way he had never expected. After breakfast, he suggested she rest while he checked the property. Emily agreed reluctantly, settling back into the bed and clutching her bundle close. Samuel stepped outside, the morning sun warming his back. He walked toward the barn first, inspecting the horses and checking the fences. Everything seemed in order, but his mind was not at ease. The forest nearby felt different in the daylight, no less foreboding, and he knew that danger could return at any moment. He thought about the bandits Emily had described, their cruelty, their persistence, and their willingness to chase her for miles. He could not allow them to find her. As he worked, Samuel considered the best course of action. The nearest town was several miles away and the road was dangerous. Calling for help could put both of them at risk. He needed a plan. He decided that he would remain vigilant, keep Emily close, and prepare to defend the ranch if necessary. The frontier demanded readiness at all times, and he had learned that lesson many times before. But this situation was different. It was personal. This was about protecting a life, not just property. Meanwhile, Emily lay in the cabin, her mind racing. She could hear Samuel moving outside, the creak of the floorboards and the distant lowing of the cattle. She felt a mix of relief and unease. Relief because she was safe, and unease because she knew that the threat of the bandits was still very real. She had run for so long, but she could not outrun fear. She thought about her family, scattered and in danger, and a quiet anger grew inside her. She had survived, yes, but the one she loved might not have. By mid-morning, Emily had gathered enough courage to sit up and speak with Samuel again. "Mr. Harper," she said softly, "I need to tell you more about what happened. They were ruthless. They didn't just want our cattle, they wanted more. I don't know why, but they were dangerous." Samuel nodded, listening intently. "Tell me everything, Emily. Don't leave anything out. We need to know what we're facing." She described the attack in detail, her voice trembling but growing stronger as she spoke. The bandits had come at night, with torches and weapons. They had shouted threats and taken everything they could carry. Her family had tried to defend themselves, but they were outnumbered. Emily had hidden when she could, running silently through the darkness, and only survived because she had found a small path leading through the woods. Samuel's jaw tightened as he listened. He had faced outlaws before, but hearing the terror in her voice, imagining what she had endured, filled him with a mixture of anger and determination. He realized that their situation was still precarious. The bandits could return at any moment. He needed to be ready. Samuel spent the next several hours preparing the ranch. He checked his rifles, ensured the doors and windows were secure, and even set small traps and warnings around the property. Every step was careful and deliberate. He could not allow panic to control him. The frontier demanded clarity and focus. As the sun climbed higher, Emily began to feel safer. She helped Samuel with small tasks, like feeding the chickens and checking the fence lines. The work was simple, yet it gave her a sense of purpose and control. Samuel watched her carefully, noting the small ways she regained confidence. She still carried the weight of fear, but step by step, she began to trust him, and perhaps even herself. By late afternoon, the light had shifted again, casting long shadows across the ranch. Samuel and Emily sat by the creek, washing some of the dirt from their hands and faces. The water was cold and clear, and the sound of it flowing over the rocks was soothing. For a moment, the terror of the night before seemed distant, replaced by the simple rhythms of life on the ranch. Samuel shared stories of his own past, of storms he had survived, and of the days when the land seemed unyielding. Emily listened, fascinated by the resilience and quiet strength of the man who had saved her. As the day drew to a close, Samuel felt a deep sense of responsibility. Emily was no longer just a stranger. She was someone he had promised to protect. The Wild West was a dangerous place, full of uncertainty and cruelty, but it was also a place where courage, kindness, and quick thinking could make a difference. He knew that the coming days would not be easy, but for now, they had found a small measure of safety. That evening, as the sun set once again, Emily and Samuel sat outside the cabin, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. The ranch was quiet, the wind gentle, and the animals calm. Yet beneath the peacefulness, both of them knew that danger could return at any moment. They had survived one night, but the threat was far from gone. Samuel placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder, silently promising that he would not let anything happen to her while she was under his care. In the quiet moments before darkness fell completely, Emily allowed herself to hope. Hope that she might survive, hope that her family might be found, and hope that the frontier, harsh and unforgiving as it was, could also offer protection and humanity. Samuel, too, felt a rare connection, an understanding that some nights, some encounters, changed a man forever. He had been a rancher, a solitary figure in a vast land, but now he was also a protector, and that role came with a weight he had never anticipated. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers and the distant sound of rustling leaves. Samuel knew that the night ahead could bring challenges, but he felt ready. Together, he and Emily had taken the first step toward facing the dangers of the Wild West, and neither would be the same again. The morning air was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of dew and wild grass across the Harper Ranch. Samuel woke early, as was his habit, and stepped outside to survey the land. The ranch looked peaceful in the soft light, the cattle grazing quietly, the horses stirring in their pens. Yet Samuel could not shake the unease that had settled over him. He had faced many dangers in his life, from storms to wild animals, but the story Emily had told him of the bandits haunted him. He knew they could return at any moment, and he had to be ready. Inside the cabin, Emily was awake as well, though she moved slowly. The night had been long, and while she had found some comfort in the warmth of the cabin and the presence of Samuel, the memory of being hunted lingered. Every shadow outside the window made her heart race. She stayed close to the fire, wrapped in a blanket, her small bundle resting beside her. She had slept fitfully, dreaming of the faces of the bandits, their cruel laughter echoing in her mind. Samuel approached her gently. "Emily," he said, "we need to talk about today. I want you to stay calm, but we have to prepare. There's a chance they might come back." Emily nodded, her hands clenching the blanket tightly. "I know," she whispered. I don't want to go back out there, but I can't just hide forever. They'll keep looking." Samuel understood. The bandits were relentless, and running had only delayed the inevitable confrontation. Yet he also knew that panic and fear would do them no good. They needed a plan, careful thinking, and courage. He decided to show Emily the layout of the ranch, the places where they could hide, and the areas where they could defend themselves. It was important that she felt some control, even in a dangerous situation. They started near the barn. Samuel explained how he had built strong fences to protect the cattle and secure areas where they could take cover if needed. He pointed out the loose planks, the sturdy posts, and the small loopholes where he could fire if attackers approached. Emily listened intently, absorbing every detail. She realized that while she was frightened, the ranch offered a few advantages: knowledge, preparation, and a man experienced in survival. Next, they walked toward the woods. Samuel showed her small paths that led into clearings, places where they could observe movement without being seen. He emphasized staying alert to every sound: the snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the distant clatter of hooves. Emily felt her pulse quicken. She knew that even in daylight, danger could be close. Samuel handed her a small pocket knife, not to fight with, but to protect herself or cut through brush if needed. It was a small gesture, but it gave her a sense of empowerment. As the day wore on, Samuel and Emily worked together on simple chores: checking the fences, feeding the animals, and repairing minor damage from the past storms. These tasks, though routine, provided a rhythm, a sense of normalcy in an otherwise tense situation. Emily began to feel a little more confident with each small task completed. She learned how to lift the gates, carry water buckets, and even handle a horse under Samuel's careful guidance. The work kept her mind occupied, leaving less room for fear to dominate. By midday, Samuel decided to take a break near the creek that ran along the edge of the property. The water was cold and clear, flowing gently over smooth stones. He showed Emily how to fill a jug, test the current, and watch for any signs of disturbance. "This creek can tell you a lot," he explained. "If someone or something comes, the water often shows it first. Look and listen carefully." Emily tried to absorb every word. The knowledge felt like a shield, something practical she could hold onto amidst uncertainty. As they rested, Emily opened up more about her family. She spoke of her parents, her younger siblings, and the life they had built on their small homestead. Tears filled her eyes as she described the moment the bandits attacked, the chaos, the smoke, and the screams. Samuel listened quietly, offering words of comfort where he could. "You survived, Emily," he said firmly. "You are safe here. That is the most important thing right now." Emily wiped her eyes and nodded. She trusted Samuel, but fear lingered like a shadow. The memory of running through the woods at night, hiding from armed men, had left a deep mark. She understood that the frontier was unforgiving and that danger could appear anywhere. Yet, For the first time since the attack, she felt a small spark of hope. Samuel's presence, his calmness, and his knowledge of the land gave her a sense that she might survive, that she might find her way through the danger. In the afternoon, Samuel began preparing the ranch for a possible attack. He checked the weapons, loaded the rifles carefully, and placed them within reach. He reinforced the doors and windows and set up small signs to alert them if anyone approached silently. Every precaution he could take was implemented, and he explained each step to Emily so she understood the measures. She asked questions, learning quickly how to recognize potential threats and react appropriately. While they worked, a subtle tension filled the air. The wind shifted, carrying sounds from the distant hills. Samuel paused, listening carefully. There it was, the faint, unmistakable jingle of horse harnesses in the distance. He froze, his eyes scanning the horizon. Emily, noticing his sudden alertness, held her breath. "Samuel," she whispered. He shook his head slightly, trying not to alarm her. "Quiet," he said softly. "Listen." The sound came again, clearer this time, faint but steady. Someone was moving toward the ranch. Samuel's heart pounded, but he maintained his composure. This was not the first time he had faced danger, but the presence of Emily made it more urgent, more personal. He motioned for her to move to a safer spot in the cabin, one of the small hideouts he had prepared. Emily followed him, her hands trembling, her heart racing. She realized that all the lessons Samuel had taught her, the observation, the preparation, the caution, were now vital. She had to trust him and follow instructions carefully. They moved silently, checking each door and window to ensure it was secure. Every step felt like an eternity, the tension building with each passing moment. Once they were in the cabin, Samuel took a position near a window where he could see outside without being seen easily. Emily crouched behind a chair, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with fear and anticipation. The minutes passed slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. The wind shifted again, carrying the distant sound of men's voices. Samuel's fingers rested lightly on his rifle, ready to defend if necessary. The voices grew louder, clearer, and now Samuel could make out more details. There were at least 3 men, moving cautiously but purposefully toward the ranch. They were looking for someone, and Samuel knew immediately that Emily's fears were justified. He signaled for her to stay quiet, reassuring her with a calm nod. Emily gripped the chair tightly, trying to keep her thoughts steady. She remembered the stories of the frontier, of people who survived attacks through courage, intelligence, and the will to endure. She would have to be strong just like them. The men approached the barn first, checking the horses and the fences. Samuel watched closely, noting their movements and trying to gauge their intentions. They did not seem to notice the cabin yet, and he hoped it would stay that way. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to remain silent. Samuel whispered instructions, guiding her without alarming the intruders. The tension was unbearable, yet both of them remained composed, relying on careful observation and calm thinking. Hours passed as the men searched the property, unaware of the cabin where Samuel and Emily hid. They seemed frustrated, unable to find what they were looking for. Samuel knew this could not last forever. He needed to think of a plan, how to protect Emily, protect the ranch, and perhaps confront the men if necessary. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. Samuel realized that the approaching darkness could either be their ally or a further complication. He had to act wisely. Finally, as the men prepared to leave the property, Samuel decided it was time to create a diversion. He quietly moved outside, using the knowledge of the land to make subtle noises and mislead them, drawing their attention away from the cabin. Emily watched, learning how to use strategy and observation in real life, and for a brief moment, the fear in her eyes was replaced by awe and understanding. Samuel was not only protecting them, he was teaching her the skills she would need to survive. By nightfall, the men had left, frustrated and unable to locate their target. Samuel returned to the cabin, tired but relieved. Emily emerged from her hiding place, her eyes wide with admiration and gratitude. They had survived the first real test, and both realized that the frontier demanded constant vigilance, courage, and quick thinking. As they sat by the fire that night, Emily felt a small sense of accomplishment. She had faced fear directly and survived, learning lessons that would serve her well in the days to come. Samuel watched her, proud of her resilience, and knew that their bond, forged through shared danger and trust, had grown stronger. The Wild West was harsh, unpredictable, and often unforgiving, but tonight, Samuel and Emily had proven that careful planning, courage, and trust could carry them through even the darkest hours. Yet both knew that this was only the beginning, and the coming days would test them in ways they had not yet imagined. The night was deep and silent. The sky stretched over the Harper Ranch like a dark blanket dotted with stars. Samuel Harper stood by the window of the cabin, watching the shadows cast by the moonlight across the fields. The events of the previous day weighed heavily on his mind. Though the bandits had left, he knew that their failure to find Emily was only temporary. They were clever, persistent, and dangerous, and they would almost certainly return. The frontier was rarely forgiving, and those who hunted often followed their prey relentlessly. Emily sat quietly on the bed, her hands folded in her lap, the small bundle beside her. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the room, but it did little to ease the tension that hung in the air. She had grown more confident over the past 2 days, learning from Samuel, but the memory of the bandits' faces, their cruel eyes and weapons still haunted her. Every noise outside, the wind brushing the trees, the hoot of an owl, the distant cry of a coyote, made her flinch. She realized that survival required constant vigilance and courage, and she tried to focus on the lessons Samuel had taught her rather than her fear. Samuel turned from the window and approached her. "Emily," he said softly, "tonight we must be ready for anything. I don't know when they will come back, but we have to prepare." Emily nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand. I will do whatever you say." He smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. "Good, that's all I ask. We need to be calm, observant, and ready to act. If they come, we will protect ourselves and we will protect this ranch." The evening passed slowly, each moment filled with anticipation. Samuel checked the doors and windows once more, making sure every lock held fast. He secured the barn and the fences and placed small markers in the fields that would alert them if anyone tried to approach silently. Emily assisted where she could, moving cautiously, her heart racing but her mind sharp. They had formed a silent understanding. Each would watch, each would listen, each would act when necessary. As the night deepened, a faint noise drifted across the fields. Samuel froze, raising a hand to signal Emily to stay quiet. The sound grew louder, a faint jingle of metal, like a horse's harness moving cautiously over the uneven ground. He moved to the window, peering through the darkness, his hand resting on the rifle he had prepared. 3 figures appeared on horseback, riding slowly, scanning the fields as though searching for something or someone. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "They're back," she whispered. Samuel nodded silently. "Stay low, don't make a sound." The men approached the barn first, their horses snorting softly in the moonlight. Samuel's heart pounded in his chest, but he remained calm, observing their movements carefully. He noticed the way they spoke in low whispers, the cautious manner in which they moved, and the tools they carried. They were experienced and dangerous, but he had a plan. He had studied the land, prepared traps, and knew the terrain better than anyone. Survival depended on using every advantage he had. Samuel signaled Emily to move to the small loft he had prepared in the cabin. "Go there quietly. Stay hidden. Do not come down unless I signal you." She obeyed, climbing the narrow stairs carefully. the fear in her chest pressing heavily against her ribs. From the loft, she could see the room below and a small window that offered a partial view of the barn and the surrounding fields. She clutched her blanket tightly, her heart racing as she watched Samuel step outside. The first confrontation began with careful precision. Samuel used the shadows of the trees to his advantage, moving silently across the open field toward the barn. He needed to distract the men, drawing their attention away from the cabin without revealing his position too soon. He tossed a small rock near a fence post, and it landed with a soft thud. One of the men glanced in that direction, signaling the others. Samuel moved again, using the terrain to mask his movements. The bandits approached cautiously, unaware that they were being observed. Samuel noted their positions and the way they communicated with low whispers. He realized that one of the men, the tallest of the group, seemed to be their leader. The man's eyes were sharp, calculating, and cruel. Samuel's stomach tightened as he recognized him, not personally, but from the description Emily had given. This was no ordinary outlaw. He was clever, experienced, and dangerous. Emily watched in silence, her hands trembling but her eyes fixed on Samuel. She felt a mixture of fear and awe, understanding the gravity of the situation and the courage it demanded. Samuel's movements were precise, calculated, and deliberate. He was not just defending the ranch. He was orchestrating a plan that relied on careful observation, patience, and timing. The bandits moved closer to the cabin, their voices low but tense. Samuel used the shadows to remain hidden, positioning himself so that he could observe without being seen. He waited for the right moment, knowing that one wrong move could jeopardize both their lives. Emily crouched in the loft, holding her breath, feeling every second stretch longer than the last. Suddenly, a branch snapped under one of the men's boots. Samuel reacted instantly, signaling Emily to stay hidden. The bandits froze, scanning the darkness, unaware that their presence had been noticed and their movements anticipated. Samuel's heart pounded, but his mind remained sharp. He had faced danger before, but protecting someone else, especially someone so vulnerable, added a new layer of responsibility. He could not fail. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The bandits searched the barn, their movements slow and deliberate. Samuel noted every detail, their focus, their mistakes, the way they underestimated the terrain and the rancher who had prepared for their return. He realized that their persistence would be their weakness. Overconfidence often led to mistakes, and he intended to exploit everyone. Emily observed, learning from Samuel's actions. She saw the importance of patience, awareness, and control in the face of danger. Her fear remained, but it was tempered by understanding. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Samuel's example taught her that survival depended on both mental and physical readiness. As the night progressed, Samuel executed a careful plan. He moved in ways that suggested the ranch was empty, drawing the bandits away from the cabin while keeping them within his line of sight. He used the shadows, the uneven ground, and the natural features of the land to remain concealed. The bandits became increasingly frustrated, their patience thinning, their movements more reckless. Finally, Samuel made a small, deliberate noise near the fence line, causing the bandits to split their attention. One of them moved toward the sound, unaware that Samuel had anticipated this action. Samuel used the moment to retreat silently to a more advantageous position, ready to defend the cabin if necessary. Emily watched, heart racing, as Samuel's strategy unfolded perfectly. The bandits were clever, but they were being manipulated by someone who knew the land, the terrain, and the value of careful observation. Hours passed and the bandits' frustration grew. They had searched the property thoroughly, found nothing, and their patience was wearing thin. Samuel remained vigilant, knowing that the danger had not passed, only been delayed. Emily learned the importance of observation, strategy, and calm under pressure. She realized that survival was not just about strength or weapons. It was about intelligence, awareness, and the ability to stay composed in a crisis. As dawn approached, the bandits finally retreated, their frustration evident in the way they rode back toward the hills. Samuel waited until they were out of sight, ensuring that Emily remained safe and hidden. Once he was certain the danger had passed for the moment, he returned to the cabin, exhausted but relieved. Emily emerged from the loft, her eyes wide with admiration and gratitude. You saved us," she whispered. Samuel shook his head, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We saved ourselves, Emily, together. Remember that. Courage, preparation, and understanding. The land can help you survive, but you must also be ready to act." The events of the night left both of them changed. Emily's fear had been confronted, tested, and tempered by the experience. She had seen the importance of strategy, patience, and trust. Samuel, too, realized the depth of responsibility he bore, not just for the ranch, but for the lives of those who depended on him. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, but through courage, intelligence, and trust, it was possible to survive, even thrive in the face of danger. As the first light of morning touched the horizon, Samuel and Emily stepped outside together, surveying the ranch. The land was calm, peaceful, and quiet, but both knew that the Wild West remained unpredictable. The danger might return, and their vigilance could not waver. Yet there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they had faced the threat together and survived. Emily looked at Samuel, a newfound strength in her eyes. I think I understand now," she said softly. "The frontier isn't just about survival, it's about learning, watching, and being ready." Samuel nodded, proud of her growth. "Exactly. The land teaches you, but it also tests you, and sometimes the people you trust teach you even more." They returned to the cabin, ready to rest briefly before resuming the daily work of the ranch. The events of the night had strengthened their bond and sharpened their skills. Emily felt a growing sense of resilience, while Samuel understood that their shared experience had created a quiet but powerful connection. The Wild West was dangerous, unpredictable, and often cruel, but it also offered lessons in courage, trust, and survival. Samuel and Emily had faced one of its many challenges, and though the path ahead remained uncertain, they had proven that determination, intelligence, and teamwork could carry them through even the darkest nights. The first rays of dawn stretched across the Harper Ranch, casting the land in a soft golden light. The events of the past few days had left both Samuel Harper and Emily exhausted, yet more aware of the dangers that surrounded them in the Wild West. The night's confrontation had tested their courage and intelligence, and for the first time since Emily's arrival, there was a sense of calm, though it was fragile. Samuel knew that the peace might be temporary. Bandits rarely gave up so easily, and he could not allow complacency to creep in. Emily stirred in the small loft of the cabin, her eyes heavy but determined. The night had been long, and though sleep had come in short bursts, she felt stronger. The lessons Samuel had taught her, about observing the land, using strategy, and remaining calm under pressure, had stayed with her. She understood that survival was not just about fleeing or hiding. It was about thinking ahead, preparing carefully, and having courage when it was most needed. She rose quietly, careful not to disturb Samuel, and looked out the window at the quiet ranch. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. Birds chirped softly in the distance, a rare sense of normalcy in a world that had been anything but calm for the past days. Samuel joined Emily shortly after, carrying a cup of coffee in each hand. He handed her one and smiled gently. "You slept well?" he asked. Emily nodded, taking the cup. "I think so. The fire helped, and I feel like I've learned a lot these past days, more than I ever imagined I could in such a short time." Samuel nodded. The frontier teaches quickly and sometimes harshly, but you've done well. You've faced fear and kept your mind clear. That is what matters." They spent the morning on routine chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and making sure the barn and cabin were secure. The work was simple but grounding, offering a sense of normalcy after the chaos of the bandits' attack. Emily's hands, once trembling from fear, now moved with purpose and confidence. Samuel watched her silently, proud of how she had grown. She was still young, still learning, but the fire of determination in her eyes showed that she would survive whatever challenges the frontier could throw at her. Around midday, Samuel decided it was time to consider their next steps. The bandits could return, and it was not enough to simply react. They had to be proactive. "Emily," he said gently, "we need to talk about what comes next. You can't stay here forever, and we need to think about how to keep you safe, and maybe help your family if possible." Emily's hands tightened around the cup she held. "My family, I hope they're alive. I don't know where they are, but I can't stop thinking about them." Samuel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will find a way. First, we make sure you are safe. Then we can plan to help the others. Right now, the important thing is to be ready for anything that might happen here." As they worked through the afternoon, the ranch remained quiet. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant forests and dry earth. Samuel remained vigilant, his eyes scanning the horizon for any movement. Emily observed him, learning how to anticipate danger, how to watch for signs, and how to stay calm when fear threatened to take over. Each moment became a lesson in awareness, patience, and courage. Suddenly, a faint noise carried across the field, a soft clatter almost hidden by the wind. Samuel froze, signaling Emily to stay calm and hidden. The sound grew closer, deliberate and steady. Samuel moved quietly toward the window, rifle in hand, observing the edge of the forest. There, partially hidden among the trees, was a group of riders. Their movements were cautious, but their intent was clear. The bandits had returned. Emily's heart pounded, but she remembered Samuel's instructions. Stay calm, observe, and be ready to act. She positioned herself in the loft where she could watch without being seen. Her eyes followed the riders as they approached, their horses, hooves silent on the soft ground. Samuel whispered instructions to her, teaching her to notice the number of men, their formation, and the way they moved. Every detail mattered. The bandits split into small groups, searching the fields and the barn once again. Samuel had anticipated their strategy and had prepared traps and subtle warnings to alert them if the men approached too closely. The bandits moved cautiously, unaware that their every action was being observed. Samuel used the terrain, shadows, and natural features of the ranch to maintain a position of advantage, ready to defend if necessary. As the tension grew, Emily realized that courage was not just about action. It was about awareness, patience, and trusting those you depended on. Samuel had shown her that preparation and careful thought could outmatch raw force. She felt a growing confidence, knowing that she was learning to navigate danger rather than simply fleeing from it. Hours passed, each moment stretching longer than the last. The bandits' patience began to thin, their movements more reckless. They were desperate to find the woman who had escaped them, unaware that Samuel had used strategy to keep them away from the cabin. Emily's heart raced with every passing shadow, but she remained calm, understanding that survival depended on maintaining composure. At last, one of the bandits made a critical mistake. He stepped on a loose plank near the fence line, causing it to creak loudly. Samuel seized the moment, moving quickly and decisively. He positioned himself in a concealed spot, ready to confront the intruder if necessary. The other bandits, realizing something was amiss, became chaotic in their movements, their discipline breaking down. Samuel used the confusion to signal Emily, guiding her to a safer position and reinforcing the importance of staying hidden. The confrontation was brief but intense. Samuel's careful planning and knowledge of the land gave him the upper hand. The bandits, frustrated and unable to locate their target, eventually fled, leaving the ranch in a tense but victorious calm. Emily emerged from her hiding place, her hands shaking but her eyes filled with relief and admiration. "You did it," she whispered. Samuel shook his head, placing a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. "We did it, together. Remember that strength alone is not enough. Courage, preparation, and trust, those are what keep you alive out here." The sun rose higher, casting light across the fields and the forest. The ranch, though scarred by the danger it had faced, seemed to breathe again with life. The cattle grazed quietly, and the horses moved calmly in their pens. Emily felt a sense of accomplishment and growth. She had faced fear, learned from experience, and survived. Samuel, too, reflected on the events. The Wild West was harsh, unpredictable, and often unforgiving. He had spent years alone, managing his ranch, surviving storms, and fending off wild animals. Yet the past days had reminded him that danger could come in many forms, and that protecting another person required more than skill. It required vigilance, patience, and a willingness to confront fear directly. Over the next few days, Emily and Samuel worked together to strengthen the ranch further. They reinforced fences, checked the barn, and prepared additional safety measures. Emily's confidence grew with each passing task. She learned not just to follow instructions, but to think ahead, anticipate danger, and use her surroundings to her advantage. The experience had changed her, instilling a resilience she had not known she possessed. Eventually, news reached them that Emily's family had survived the bandits' attack, though their home had been damaged. Samuel and Emily planned a journey to reunite her with them, ensuring they could rebuild and find safety. Emily's gratitude towards Samuel was deep, not only for protecting her but for teaching her the skills and courage necessary to face the world. As they prepared for the journey, Samuel stood outside the cabin, looking over the ranch one last time before they left. The land stretched wide and open, a place of beauty, challenge, and endless lessons. He had faced danger and survived, but more importantly, he had helped someone find strength in the face of fear. Emily joined him, her eyes bright with determination and hope. "Thank you, Samuel," she said softly, "for everything." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "You've earned it, Emily. You've learned to watch, think, and act. You've faced fear and survived. That is more than many ever achieve." The journey to her family's home was long but filled with purpose. Emily carried with her the lessons of the past days, the courage she had found within herself, and the trust she had learned to place in those who protected her. Samuel guided her carefully, ensuring safety while encouraging independence. The bond they had formed through shared danger and perseverance was strong, and it would remain with them both. When they finally reached Emily's family, the reunion was filled with tears, relief, and quiet joy. Though their home had been damaged, the family had survived, and Emily had grown stronger through the experience. Samuel remained nearby, a steady presence, proud of the young woman who had faced terror and emerged stronger. As they prepared to return to the Harper Ranch, Emily looked back at the path they had traveled, reflecting on the lessons learned. The Wild West was dangerous, full of challenges and threats, but it also offered opportunities for courage, growth, and resilience. She had survived not only because of luck but because of awareness, preparation, and trust. Samuel watched her, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The frontier demanded strength, patience, and courage, and he had seen all of those qualities in Emily. The experience had changed both of them, forging a bond and a sense of respect that would endure. As the sun set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Emily and Samuel knew that the frontier would always carry risks. But they also knew that with courage, vigilance, and trust, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And in that knowledge, they found not just survival, but hope, strength, and the quiet triumph of having faced fear and endured.